The Redwood Diner stood alone on a quiet highway, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to stretch endlessly. It wasn't fancy, but it had a reputation for serving the best late-night coffee and pie for miles. For decades, truckers, drifters, and locals stopped by, drawn to its neon sign that flickered faintly in the dark. Lucy, a college dropout in her early 20s, had been working the graveyard shift for a year. She needed the money and liked the solitude. The diner was never busy after midnight, just a few regulars and the occasional traveler. It gave her time to think, to dream, about getting out of town someday. That night felt different. The air was heavy, almost oppressive, as if the woods were pressing closer than usual. The shift started like any other. Lucy wiped down the counter, refilled the ketchup bottles, and checked her phone. No messages, no calls. She sighed and slid the phone into her apron pocket. Around 1 a.m., the bell above the door jingled. A man walked in, tall and wiry, with a face that looked like it had seen too many hard days. His clothes were dusty, and his boots left faint prints on the tile floor. He didn't say a word, just nodded at Lucy, and took a seat at the counter. Coffee? She asked, forcing a smile. He nodded again. Lucy poured him a cup, watching him out of the corner of her eye. Something about him unsettled her. He didn't look dangerous, exactly, but there was a stillness to him that felt unnatural. You passing through? She asked, trying to break the silence. Something like that, he replied, his voice low and gravelly. He sipped his coffee slowly, his eyes fixed on the window as if expecting to see something or someone outside. Lucy followed his gaze, but all she saw was the reflection of the diner's fluorescent lights. Minutes passed. The man didn't order food, didn't check his phone, didn't even glance at the menu. He just sat there, staring, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the counter. At 2 a.m., another customer walked in. It was Gary, a trucker who stopped by almost every night for a slice of pie and some small talk. His cheerful demeanor usually put Lucy at ease, but tonight he seemed uneasy. Quiet night? Gary asked as he slid into his usual booth. Yeah, just the way I like it, Lucy replied, though her voice lacked conviction. Gary glanced at the man at the counter, then back at Lucy. You okay? He asked softly. Fine, she said quickly, not wanting to make a scene. Gary nodded but didn't look convinced. He ordered his usual, and Lucy busied herself warming up a slice of cherry pie. As the hours dragged on, the tension in the diner grew. The man at the counter didn't move, didn't ask for a refill, didn't even flinch when the bell above the door jingled again. This time, it was a young couple, their laughter and energy feeling out of place in the stifling atmosphere. The couple sat in a booth near the back, oblivious to the unease that hung in the air. They ordered burgers and milkshakes, their voices breaking the silence with chatter and occasional bursts of laughter. But the man at the counter never turned to look at them. He never looked at Gary either. His focus was solely on the window. At 3:15 a.m., the power flickered. The lights dimmed, the hum of the fridge stuttered, and the neon sign outside buzzed loudly before going dark. The diner fell into an eerie quiet, broken only by the sound of rain beginning to tap against the windows. Lucy's heart raced. She hated storms, and something about the darkness outside felt suffocating. She grabbed a flashlight from beneath the counter and checked her phone again. Still no service. Generator should kick in soon, she said, more to herself than anyone else. But the generator didn't kick in. The diner remained cloaked in dim emergency lighting, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist across the walls. The young couple started whispering, their earlier cheerfulness gone. Gary shifted uncomfortably in his booth, his eyes darting to the man at the counter, who hadn't moved an inch. Maybe we should close up. Gary suggested. Lucy hesitated. It wasn't standard policy to close early, but tonight didn't feel normal. Tell you, I think you're right, she said finally. Let me grab the key. As she turned to exit the office, the man at the counter spoke for the first time since his initial reply. We won't make it, Lucy frowned. What do you want? She asked, her voice trembling. The man turned slowly to face her, his eyes dark and unreadable. They're already here, he said. Before Lucy could respond, the diner's front door creaked open, but no one had touched it. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decay. The young couple bolted from their booth, their footsteps echoing in the silent diner. But as they reached the door, they stopped abruptly. Hey, are you okay? The guy asked, his voice shaking. Lucy couldn't see who he was talking to, but she heard it. A faint whisper, like leaves rustling in the wind. It grew louder, more insistent, until it became a low, guttural growl. Get back! Gary shouted, his voice breaking the spell. The couple turned and ran back inside, slamming the door shut behind them. Lucy gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. What's going on? She whispered. The man at the counter stood up, his movements deliberate and calm. It's been following me, he said. What has? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the counter to Lucy. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. The paper was blank, except for a single sentence scrawled in shaky handwriting. Don't trust the lights. Before she could ask what it meant, the emergency lights flickered. For a brief moment, the diner was plunged into total darkness. When the lights came back on, the man was gone. Oh, oh. But it all happened in an instant. Lucy stared at the empty stool where he'd been sitting, her mind racing. She turned to Gary and the couple, but their faces were pale, their eyes wide with fear. Did you see where he went? She asked. They shook their heads. The rain outside intensified, hammering against the windows. And then, from somewhere deep in the woods, Lucy heard a low, guttural growl, just like the one from earlier. She looked at the piece of paper in her hand, the words burning into her mind. And we don't trust the lights. The lights flickered again, and this time they didn't come back on.